I'm going to start this morning with a question. Is it possible to be in more than one place at the same time? So, for instance, I could be here at the front of church, but at the same time, I can be here upstairs. And all the while, I'm still talking to you from both places. So now, there are two of me. Unless you're my kids watching this with me on a Sunday morning, in which case, there are now three of me. That doesn't bear thinking about, does it? Okay, so look, it is possible for me to be in more than one place at the same time if I use a camera and record myself speaking. But I can't do it for real, can I? Or can I? No, I can't. Don't be ridiculous. It isn't possible. If I am here, I cannot physically be somewhere else at the same time. It just isn't possible for anyone. Except for God. See, the Bible tells us that God is in fact everywhere. Not that he could go anywhere, although he could, he's God, he can do anything. No, the Bible tells us that God is everywhere, all the time. See, this is called God's omnipresence. Omnipresence. It's a big, impressive word, but it simply means that God is everywhere, all the time. So think about that in terms of this globe. So this globe, it shows everywhere in the world, doesn't it? All the different countries. And if God can be everywhere all at once, that means that from Alaska to Antarctica, from Peru to Papua New Guinea, he covers all these different countries, all at the same time. Last week, we looked at how God was eternal. He has no beginning and he'll have no end. That was pretty incredible in itself. But equally incredible is the fact that God can be everywhere all at once. Another way to help picture this might be to think of this line here as a line chart showing the timeline of the history of the world. So you've got down here where the world began, and you've got down here where the world will end. Now, we don't know where in the chart we are. We could be here in the middle. We could be somewhere near the end. We could even still be somewhere quite near the beginning. We just don't know. Only God does. That's because, like we looked at last week, God is eternal. So God would actually fill the whole of this line. Because, like we said, before the world began, he was there, and he'll be there after the world ends. In fact, it's not enough to think of it just as in filling this whole line. He takes up more than that. Because if we're now thinking in terms of him being everywhere, we need to recognise that not only does he take up the whole line, but he actually goes way beyond in either side and never ends. He goes all the way to the ceiling. He goes all the way out to the door. In fact, if this tiny little line is the whole history of the world, God more than fills the entire room. That is some pretty mind-blowing stuff, isn't it? So you ask, why is that good news for us? Why is it a good thing that God is everywhere? Well, firstly, because God can be everywhere all at once, he's able to support all of his people at once. If God couldn't be everywhere at once, then he couldn't support all his people at once. So think about it. If God couldn't be everywhere at once, then he couldn't have been with me at work this week if he was already with Rachel as she started secondary school. It just wouldn't work. Unless God can be everywhere all at once. Last week, Johnny Pierce was talking to the adults about a slave girl called Hagar. Now in Genesis, she called God El Roi, which means a God of seeing. See, because God is everywhere, he can see everything that happens to us. No matter where we are, what we're going through, we can take comfort from the fact that God is right there with us, experiencing it with us. Whether we're struggling with a difficult task, like we're at school sitting a difficult test, or we're in our beds at night worrying about how dark it is, we should always remember that God is right there with us, helping us. But not just that, he's not just there when things go wrong, he's also there when things go well, like we're playing our favourite sport really well, or we're playing a musical instrument brilliantly. He's right there with us, and he's really happy for us too. It doesn't matter whether what we're going through is good or bad. God is always there, wherever we are, and always with us. So that's the first reason why it's good news for us that God is everywhere. The second reason is that because God is always able to be with us, he's always able to also know what we're always thinking, and he can always hear our prayers. See, how much better is it to be loved and supported and cared for by somebody who knows us, who loves us, and who has seen what we're going through, who knows what we've been experiencing, rather than somebody who's just way off and has no idea what's happening to us. See, if God wasn't everywhere all at once, then how could he hear our prayers? Would there be like some big email inbox where everybody's prayers come in order and they sit waiting for him to read through them one by one? Would he ever get through all of them? The other thing about God always being with us, though, is that he knows our thoughts, both good and bad. King David wrote about this in one of his psalms. Where can I go to get away from your spirit? Where can I run from you? Psalm 139, verse 7. See, David realised that there was nowhere he could go, nowhere he could run to that God was not with him. Now, that's great when you need to feel God encouraging you, when you need to feel him supporting you. But it's also a reminder that we always need to be careful about what we think and what we say and what we do. We need to remember that God is always with us, and he will see when we're kind and when we're good and when we're tested and when we're in trouble, but he will also see when we're unkind to people, when we're mean, when we do things we shouldn't, when we think wrong things. Unfortunately, we will all do that from time to time, and that is when we should be so grateful that Jesus died on the cross for us. That no matter how badly we've behaved, no matter what God has seen us doing, Jesus has offered us that way to still be right with God. That's why it's so important to pray for forgiveness when we do things wrong. Because God already knows what we've done. He's just waiting for us to say sorry. So, building on from last week, we learnt that God was eternal. He has no beginning and no end. He always is and always will be. Now, we also know that God is omnipresent. God is everywhere, all the time. And for us personally, that means that no matter where we go, what we do, he is always there. He's always supporting us, guiding us, loving us, listening to us. How amazing is that? So for this week's verse to learn, let's just take that verse we just looked at. Where can I go to get away from your spirit? Where can I run from you? Psalm 139, verse 7. Have a go at learning that. Now for this week, I'm going to leave you with Edmund and Jenny reminding us of last week's verse to learn from John. I'll see you next week.
Hello everyone. John chapter 3 verse 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life.